we need to talk about your dog's food bowl. You see, DIY dog food has exploded in recent years with the proliferation of articles and people going against kibble. And so because people have been finding out what companies put in their food, they have decided to take their matter into their own hands, just like yourself. But sadly, there are many things people are doing wrong, and in this video I am going to expose at least 6 things that you might be doing wrong and how you can correct them. The first one is that you have the proportions wrong. Now, there is a lot of literature and studies and different people telling you all sorts of different things, but in theory our dog's diet should try to replicate what our dogs would eat if they were left to their own devices. And what would that be? That would be roughly 80-10-10. If your dog were left to their own devices and they caught a small mammal, that small mammal roughly comprises of 80% meat, 10% offal, of which 5% is liver, and 10% bone. Now, we can then debate whether our dog would then go on and eat a handful of berries or some seasonal fruits and vegetables that miraculously they would encounter. But anything that deviates from meat should account for a very, very minimal amount of their diet. And actually, I'm going to explain that in a lot more detail later on in the video. And that totally brings me to point number 2, and that is that you do not understand veg. You do not understand the role of vegetables correctly in your dog's diet. The one core thing that sometimes people do not understand about veg is that whenever we feed our dogs veg, we aren't feeding our dog, we are feeding our dog's gut. You see, dogs cannot break down raw vegetables. They don't have something called salivary amylase in their mouth, and they struggle breaking them down in the pancreas, liver and kidneys. So it is important for you to break down those vegetables before they go into your dog. There is something called polyphenols, and those are the nutrients, the vitamins and the minerals that are so beneficial to your dog. And in order for your dog to access those polyphenols, they need to be broken down. They might need to be pureed and they might need to be processed somehow. Maybe you can lightly cook some leafy greens for maybe 10 seconds, and that can then be broken down for your dog to be able to absorb those polyphenols, all those goodies. But the one recurring theme that I see all the time is that people will give their dogs raw carrots and raw broccoli and loads of vegetables that don't really have any dietary benefit to our dogs. Whenever people feed their dogs vegetables, they sometimes give them raw, and so those vegetables are then passed down and passed through undigested, and you can see them coming out the other end. So that means that your dog is not absorbing the nutrients and the vitamins that those vegetables are intended to do for your dog. Another thing that I would say to you would be that keep these to a very, very minimal. I would not go crazy with my dog's vegetables. I would maybe go between 3 and 6% of the overall diet if you must, but I wouldn't go 10, 15, 20 or 50% like a lot of people do. Another very common mistake that people make is they do not provide their dogs with enough variety, and this happens sometimes because their dog might be picky, and the only way people get their dog to eat might be to just stick to one single protein, say beef, say chicken, say turkey, say whatever. The problem is that you would not eat the same thing every day. You would not get all the nutrients and vitamins and minerals that you need from just one food, from just one protein source. So providing your dog with a wide array of different proteins That can range from venison to lamb to chicken to sardines to veal to whatever. That can be extremely beneficial. If we have learned something from kibble, is that they do not deviate in the bag of food. It's always the same sort of cereal-based dog food. It's always the same recipe when it comes to kibble. So what we want to do is avoid the same mistakes that kibble companies are doing, and the fallacy of just giving your dog something complete and balanced with just one recipe. So the more recipes, the more variety you give your dog, the better it's going to be for them. The more they are going to engage and be benefited from you cooking their food or from you making their food. And that brings me to point number 4, and that is that you are confused and you mix different things. DIY dog food with wet food, with raw food. Now you do this, now you do that, and you are very inconsistent. And this might be because, again, your dog might be picky, or because you haven't been informed yourself when it comes to dog food. So if you are going to DIY your dog's food, the best thing you need to do is inform yourself and try to stick to the 80-10-10 formula, and that is really going to simplify things for you and make your dog's diet a lot more wholesome. Talking about mistakes though, this is a big one, and it's point number 5. Not adding any bone whatsoever to your dog's diet or getting the ratios wrong altogether. Let me explain. So our dogs have a necessity to eat bone. It's a phenomenal source of calcium and it's part of your dog's diet. A lot of people that DIY their dog's food, they do not include any bone or any source of calcium, and this is something we see all day, every day. So if you are doing this for your dog, you must include a source of bone for your dog. Try not to make it more than 10% of your overall dog's diet, and do not cook the bone. All you need to do is buy bones. You can support your local pet shop if you want, but you never cook these bones. You give them to your dog raw, and that is the best way to feed bones to your dog. Keep it simple. Don't give the dog massive bones. Give them manageable, easy to digest and easy to break down bones, and your dog will be a lot happier. When it comes to bones though, if you picture just a simple bone, that's not sometimes how bones come. Bones come in the form of drumsticks or chicken thigh with the bone, for example. So what you need to do is work out the different proportions of bone and meat ratios and try to tailor that to your dog's diet. So a simple bone will not be the same as a drumstick with the meat attached. So you need to make certain calculations so you get the proportions right, or the 80-10-10. If you go over or under this bone content, well, your dog might get into trouble. They might get constipated. They might get all the health issues. Bone is such an important part of your dog's diet that it cannot be overlooked. Number 6 is that you add things that do not belong in dog food. Things like rice, things like barley, things like corn, anything that does not belong in dog food does not belong in dog food. For example, if you look at your dog's mouth, they wouldn't be able to chew rice or pasta or bread or things like that. Why? Because they cannot move their mouths side to side. They cannot chew food like me and you. So it is redundant for us to provide our dogs with something they do not need. Remember, when you are doing your dog's food, you are the steward of your dog's health, and you must be able to know and determine what's good and bad for your dog. Your dog is a meat and bone eater primarily, and a small proportion of their food might be berries or fruits or vegetables, but they have to be made in the right way. They cannot be added willy-nilly and with any thought behind it. Which brings me to point number 7, and this is an extra one. And this is that your dog does not have any dietary requirement for carbohydrates whatsoever. Let me explain this. Your dog and my dog can make their own blood sugar from just protein and fat. They can convert their energy. They can make their own energy with just protein and fat in a process called gluconeogenesis. This means that me and you are likely to need carbohydrates to make our own energy, to be able to function properly. Dogs do not need this. They can make their own energy, their own glucose from just protein and fat without having any dietary requirement for carbohydrates whatsoever. This is a very clear indication that your dog and my dog is a facultative carnivore, and the bulk of their diet should be meat, organs and bone, and not all the carbohydrates that people give their dogs unnecessarily. Now, DIYing your dog's food can be a bit of a minefield, and so it is very important for you to consult with a professional. And I recently sat down with someone who needs no introduction in this world. Dr. Brendan Clark gives a masterclass of what to do and, more importantly, what not to do whenever it comes to giving your dog certain foods and the dangers of certain foods. And if you are really interested about what the best dog food is for your dog and how to do this and how to do that, I highly encourage you to watch this video next.